Hi, I'm Craig Phillips. In this video, I'm going to show you how I designed and transformed this entire area from this old, tired, worn out room to this beautiful Victorian setting that you could have in any part of your house. Using tray panels, paintable, moulded wall beadings and dado rails. Now, as you can see from my painted existing walls, they're not in very good shape, but I find the quickest and the best finish is to clad over them by using an 8 foot by 4 foot sheet of MDF. These ones I'm using are only 12mm wide. I'm applying my Grab-adhesive on the back of the boards and simply pressing them nice and flat into position. Once the first board is in, I can do the same on my second board and butt the joint up nice and tight. These can be filled and sanded at a later date. Now, the next stage is for me to draw myself a plan and work out the sizes that I want to form the picture frames, the height of the dado rail, that of course all coincides with fitting into my wall. So I've got myself a piece of paper here. I'm going to draw a rectangle box. Now, the overall length of my wall that way is 3,355mm in length, and my height is 2,340. It's nearly 8 foot high. Of course, your sizes at home might be different, but I'll need the sizes on here to make sure that I draw this and it's symmetric with each size picture frame in here. So I'm going to pretty much draw a line right the way down the center here, and then another line down the center of that one. This is to just scale my actual wall out. Okay, so throughout the center point, I'm going to have a dado rail across there, and that's going to stand round about 1 meter high. So I'll take my black marker pen now for the dado rail, and that's going to span all the way across here. Okay, these two adjacent walls, either side here and here. This one here is over there where I've got what looks like a staircase along there, because when we continue around the wall with our pictures, I also want to carry that on up the stairs, and that is just going to be a standard corner area there. So our dado rail will continue around here and here, and we'll also continue around here and here. But for this front, let's say, focal point, we need to have our squares working in here. So again, I'll take my marker pen. I'm going to have 4 set size rectangular squares. And you can be as creative as you want to be with these type of picture frames. The ones at the bottom, I'm going to have a little bit smaller. But what it's important to do is get certain lines square and level. So that's what we're going to be kind of looking at on our wall there. Now, this really gets a little bit more complicated because you have to work out exactly how big you want your square frames to be, or rectangular frames. We've established the ones on the top are going to be a little bit bigger than the ones on the bottom, but they do have to be the same width. So sometimes you can work out the gaps between them again to make it symmetrical and balanced on your wall. So for me, this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to have a gap here of 100mm. Where I've put my mark there, of course it's not on the wall, but there'll be 100mm either side, which will take that to 200mm between these. 100mm either side, 200mm in the middle, and 100 in here. And then generally about, same again here, 100 from where your square sits above your center rail. And if that is the case, then you go for another 100mm below as well. And remember, these measurements that I'm suggesting, they're not set in stone. You don't have to do them. This is kind of my version of just trying to get it well balanced on the eye and when people look at it. along the wall there. Okay, so we've got our sizes all the way along there. Now I have already calculated this up, of course, off camera. So the width of the outside edges is going to be 833 millimeters. Now yours will be different. If you're sticking to the same size gaps like I am, your squares may be a bit different because the width of your wall might be longer or shorter. There we go. Same again along here, 833, 833, which now my boxes themselves are going to be around 633. Same along here, 633, and so on. And now we go for the length of this one, which my one is going to be about 1 meter 40 millimeters. So that's going to be 1040. 1040. So our top boxes, we know they're going to be about 630 wide by 1040 millimeters high. My bottom boxes are going to be 630 wide to match the top, and the bottom are also going to be about 633. So they'll be pretty much a square box here on the bottom. And that measurement then gives me probably about 250, 300 millimeters from the floor. Now, of course, you could also put a skating board on there as well. I haven't got any skating board here, so I won't be doing it. I'm just going to stick with my dado rail in the center and 8 boxes on the flat back wall. Once I've got that into situ, then I'm going to start working my way around the corner, the 2 corners, should I say, and up the stairs. Now, the length of my mouldings stand 8 foot tall, and of course can be cut down to any size you need them, and there's a couple of ways of cutting them. Don't recommend cutting them with an electronic chop saw. It's a little bit too big, powerful, abrasive for this type of material. What you do need, cut block like this with a fine tooth saw. Let's get a small offcut like this, placed into position, set at the 45-degree angle, and then there we go. They are cut down to 45 to form a corner angle like that. Now that's one option of cutting them with the fine tooth saw. However, there's this little device that I've only just recently come across. So I want to form myself a square here. I've cut these at 45, the same length of course. I've marked up this on the top and bottom there. This is also set at 45-degree angle to cut. I place it in and chop. It goes into position, and there we have our cut 45-degree angle to form our picture frame. Now for my cut, I'm going to stick with these steel scissors. It's the first time I've ever used them, but I'm really impressed with how quick and clean you can get that cut at 45-degree angle. It really is quite impressive. And the material as well, there's no splinters on there. It just really strikes its way through it every single time. So we'll go with that for our cuts. So I'm going to cut myself a kit of parts. I'm going to start off with the long length, which is 1040 millimeters for my size, and I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces of that. So my first end, I'm going to set it up, which side, and cut off a 45-degree angle like that. And then that outside edge is going to give me my length at 1040 millimeters. It's a little bit tricky, but once you've got the first one cut, this is going to be your template for the rest of them. That's marked at 140, put it back into place. As always, measure twice, cut once. Tape on that end, double check, 1040 40mm, perfect. And then I place that into my gauge where it's got a flush piece on the upright stand here, which allows it to butt into position. Keep your fingers very clear at all times, of course. As quick as that. Now that is one of my very first pieces, which is going to be somewhere on this wall when we transfer their measurements on the wall, and then we'll cut the 8 pieces for the top and bottom of the frame. I'll place this newly cut piece against the offcut, square that edge up there, do it exactly at 45. Take my pen and transfer the end down here. It'll also be 45. And then, there we go. And there we have 2 pieces now. I'm just going to cut another 6 more of these. Now for my smaller pieces, which are 633 for my sizes on there. So again, I'll start off with a full piece, trimming the edge off to get my starting 45-degree angle. Line him up. There we go. That will form the bottom of one of these, like that. There we go. And same again now for the top. Now, that's one cut. I need to cut 8 to finish this row, and then I can focus on the bottom row. Right, so we have 2 long ones cut to size and 2 shorter ones, which will form a rectangle like this. And what we have got to do is work out a way how we fix these together, and then of course mark up your plans on the wall and mount them to the wall. And there's a couple of different ways of doing it, and I'm going to show you both in this video because you may find one way a little bit easier than the other. So here we go. We've got our rectangular shape here. I've got myself quite a large set square. If you haven't got one of them at home, if you have got a square piece of timber or a square edge to a table or something to work off, that is going to be easier because you can bring your edges of your bead right up to that end there. Now, one way is to apply your glue along the back of these and fix them into position, maybe with a nail gun, or just your Grab-adhesive will hold them to the wall there if you're using a decent one. Or you can fix all 4 corners of these edges of the frame together using a mitre kit, which is an activator and also an adhesive. So I'm going to try to put a couple of them together like this first, and then we can hold them up on the wall and show you what they're going to be like. So if I take these edges, give my activator a good shake up, spray a little bit on the end of here, same again on here, and then a little bit of the adhesive. And then of course, once they're placed together, their activating solution in there is going to start those to activate. Keep your square edge up there nice and square, and your square edge up along here nice and square. You may have a tiny little gap. Don't worry about that at the moment. These are going to be filled and painted. But that there, you know, if you have your set square as well, can also be helpful, placing that in the center. And these glues do tend to dry in anywhere between 10 seconds, 30 seconds. Okay, so there we have one corner now fixed. I'll do the same on this side. Just moving them a little touch, just so they don't stick to the board below. That's happened before. Now that's had about a minute. Here we go. We have one frame made. Just another 8 more to do for this back wall. Now the 8 frames are made and leant up against the wall, I'm going to refer back to my drawing here and start setting out the height that they need to be applied to the wall. So we know the sizes of them. If I come back to my wall height now, I'm going to go from the ground up to 1 meter high there, which is going to be my Dado rail height. That stands at 60 millimeters, which will bring me down to about here. And then I want another 100 millimeters below that, which takes me to about here. And that's where the bottom of the frames, the bottom row of the frame, should I say, will sit at the top of that line. And then above here now, I'm going to go another 100 millimeters high, and that will be the bottom of the top row of frames, if that makes sense. I'm going to draw a few little lines here on the wall, and then I'm going to get my laser level, put it across, and start to glue and fix these into position. So now the laser beam is set up at the height of the bottom of my frame where it's going to be mounted, and then the center point here is the center of this wall. What I need to do now is transfer my measurements on here. Remember, we're having 100 millimeters either side of the frames, so that is 200 millimeters there, 200 there, 200 here, and then just 100 either side, and then that'll allow me to take it around the corners. So I'm going to make some marks on here now, apply my adhesive, and stick my first frame into position. So now I've moved my center laser beam across onto this one here. Of course, if you don't have a laser level at home, this can all be done with a long spirit level. You transfer your levels across, take your measurements, and then of course level from top to bottom. That line also will allow the bottom one to also be fixed into place. So now I'm going to apply a multi-use glue all the way down the back. One nice line all the way around. Carefully lift up my frame. There we go. And the adhesive allows you to just maneuver the shape of that and press it in. It'll grab and take the weight of your frame without it sliding down if you're using a good adhesive. And that just lets you then press it, line it up, and put it into position. Now with a decent adhesive, it shouldn't slide down the wall. It'll absorb really well into the MDF background. However, you might have got on a long length of these a little bit of kind of bow in there when you're mitering the corners and squeezing them together with the glue. So if you do, the great thing is whether you've drawn a line up here with your spirit level or you're using a laser level like that, you can see my center bit is pushed out only about 2 millimeters. Get a little small bit of tape and tape that on like that. And that will dry now really quickly. It's not going to slide down and it's pulling it square and level. Same again on this side. If I'm concerned about that side, I can always move my level. There it is. And that, well, that looks perfect maybe. Yeah, a millimeter or two in there as well. Perfect. Now, I'm going to do the same with my second one. The adhesive that I'm using is a universal hybrid polymer adhesive and sealant. It's perfect for these type of projects. It adheres to most surfaces and the curing time is really quick. You'd only need to apply a small amount on the back edge of the trim, right the way around the whole frame, and then it can simply be lifted and placed into position. Pressing down all 4 corners and around the edges, you'll soon feel it quickly grab to the surface. Check that the trims are square, either with your laser level or a spirit level. There's 2 options to hold it into position before it cures. One, you can use some tape like this, or if you have a small nail gun, you can fire some small pins through there, which will hold it firmly into position while the adhesive dries. So that's my 8 frames now set into position along the back wall. It's not quite finished yet because it still has to have the Dado rail in the center. However, I'm turning my attention to the corners here. I'm going to set that up exactly the same as I did on here, continue my lines through and my gaps being 100 millimeters to match that and the opposite end, and then I can continue them across there with the same size picture frames themselves, the small square and then the rectangular one on the top. Now over on the opposite wall, again, I'm going to continue around the corner like that side, keeping all these at the same height and the same gaps between them. However, I've now got this piece of timber here, which is acting as a stair runner up there basically. So you'd have your staircase, you know, working your way up there. Now what I'm going to do this side is I'm going to continue around with my dado rail across here and not straight into the stairs. I'm going to get myself a measurement and then angle that and continue up following the run of the actual stairs themselves. And then once that is in position and I've got my standard squares and rectangular fixed on here, then when I come further along, they're not going to be squares or rectangles no more. The top half of them is, but the bottom is going to be cut on an angle to match the degree of your stairs. So that's two further frames now fitted to the adjacent wall on there. We started off on that corner, we've worked our way around all the way across here and returned it onto this side. What I'm going to do now is start to fit my dado rail all the way along the back wall, might run it at 45-degree angles in both corners, and then again working it into the room. But when I get to here, the bottom of the stairs, then I will set the angle differently and follow the degree of the stairs, and that'll set my precedence for where the next squares go up the stairs, following the angle of the stairs. The dado rail can also be cut just like the wall bead, with a fine tooth saw and an angle miter box. Once cut, place the dado length against the wall, offering the cut into the corner. If you're happy with this, then start to apply your adhesive to the back on the two raised edges of the dado rail. Place it back up against the wall into position and press it firmly until the adhesive grabs, adding a couple of pieces of tape to hold it into position until it dries. Then do the same with the adjoining piece, cut another 45-degree angle. If it fits well, apply some polymer sealant or filler to the corner joint. Then apply your grab-adhesive to the rear of the dado rail and fix that into position. Then continue the rest of the run of the dado rail, cutting it down to size, applying filler to the joint and adhesive to the rear of the trim before fixing it into position. So that's two sections of the dado rail now cut down to size, mitered in the corner and fitted into position. I've also applied a filler, a paintable filler, over the tops and the bottoms of the actual dado rail and around some of the bead areas, because you don't want any gaps between the bead and the back surface as well. Where our boards are here, again, I've filled some of the joints in there, so when it's all painted up you will not see any of them, and it's flexible as well so it won't crack. And I always do advise putting a flexible filler on between the beads and the surface. Now coming over to this corner, again we've got a 45 in there, we'll cut another one, we'll continue it along level. But this is where it gets tricky now, getting this angle cut here. Your normal tools that you've got aren't going to work on it. You know, these standard cutting blocks like that are just 90 degrees. They're not going to work, and these type of set squares simply will not work. Your sliding bevels will kind of almost find your angle for you, but if there's no numbers on there, you're going to have to refer to using an angle finder like this, which it has got all the degrees and angles on there, so we will need one of them. And also this cutting miter block, which the great thing about this is we can press that in and we can maneuver to pretty much any angle that we want. Now this is our first awkward joint cut. We've got to work out what the angle is. So you can see a number of lines that I've drawn on here. When we continue across the top of our dado rail is there, if I place a piece along the top of that and then draw a line underneath it, okay? So that's our top and bottom of the dado rail. We've also got this line coming up here, which is the very bottom of the toe of the stairs, which comes up to this point. I've made a measurement of that and sent it up the staircase, so I can now position where the dado rail is going to be following the degree of the stairs. And that gives me these two lines here and here. Now, of course, they cross. If I hold this here, that's coming down to there, and then this is going to continue across here, and it's got to meet somewhere across there. So how do we work that out? I've then drawn a line. That's my top and bottom. That's my top and bottom. Where they meet them two cross points meet, I've drawn another line through there. And now that gives me the degree. And then when I get a tool like this, I can slide it along the bottom, turn this point. As long as that is flush with my bottom line here, I can set that little dial along there, and that is now, I'll tighten it up so it doesn't move, that's now giving me a measurement of about 110 degrees. So it's not the 90 degree, it's not the 45, it's about 110. I need to transfer that measurement onto my miter block saw and cut my first piece of dado rail, and hopefully it will meet here and here. So we take our offcuts, place them on our line here, top and bottom. We see that we've got the right angle there, and then we place this offcut back into position, and that should fit nice and snug there. You can see our lines across here are spot on, and same again on the underside and the top there, and we've got a nice neat joint there. You can always have a bit of filler in as well, but that's the angle that we need. What we need to do now is cut the full length pieces to match them. Now, if you want to continue your squares up the stairs and up the stairs below the dado rail, you've got to continue with the pattern, of course. So I've drawn out across here. That's my same size gap, 200mm, the same as the rest of them, and 100mm line here, the same as here. Now, you put your straight piece along there, just like we did below. Draw the lines either side of it, and the piece across there. Drawing the lines either side of it. Then you draw your line in between from corner to corner to find that angle, exactly like what we did on here. Now again, I've cut up a couple of little off-cut pieces. That now will slide down there and go into that angle, and then this one should, there we go, butt up to there. And once that's had some filler and glue on it, of course, and fixed into place, painted over, it will be seamless. And that's how we complete our frames, working our way up the stairs. And of course, you continue that all the way up to the top. Remember, the measurements that I've been giving out throughout this build are purposely for my size room. Yours may be different at home, so do work that out from the very start when you draw out your plans. And there's a number of ways that you can paint it. Of course, you can always use your trusty paintbrush and roller, or if you do have a paint sprayer, this is going to be so much quicker and you're going to get a better result. Apply a coat of primer on it first, and then your second coat, make sure it's suitable to cover both the MDF and your trims. So that's how you design, set out and install tray panels, paintable moulded, wall beading and dado rails. So if you're looking for more inspiration or just want to view the vast range of products that Tray Panel stock, head straight over to their website, wallsandfloors.co.uk.